Hi, everybody. Thank you. Welcome. As many of you know, this is the first Harlow seminar of the 2025 season. So I'm really glad you all made it out here today. My name is Casey. I'm the station manager here this year. And I have a couple of housekeeping items for those of you who maybe just fell into this seminar and want to know a little bit about the Research Institute up here. We have a website. You can go to uwnps.org. You can sign up for a mailing list and learn more about our seminars and everything else that we do up here. And we also have a paper, hopefully not ruined paper, that you can sign up as well with your email. And that is on a clipboard that's floating around here. And if you're interested in the researchers we've already had up here this season, we have a lovely little wall over here that has short abstracts from them. But without further ado, I'm very excited to present to you Michelle Toshack. Get that right? Perfect. Okay, I had to ask her before. But she's here as a conservation scientist with Xerces Society. She coordinates their Bumblebee Atlas program, and she will be telling us more about that today.
Thank you, Casey. Okay, so we're going to use the mic tonight so that everyone can hear me in the back. So how does this sound to everybody? Good, good. All right. Well, it's so great to be here. My name is Michelle Toshack. I work for the Xerces Society as a conservation biologist. And the Bumblebee Atlas was started last year in the Rocky Mountain region. So before that, we had Pacific Northwest, we had the East Coast, but finally we now have the Rocky Mountains. So I've been interested in bugs since I graduated from college. I actually had a failed stint in marine biology and then on a whim got a field job surveying butterflies in Washington, traveling all around the national parks, and I got hooked and have been studying insects ever since. So I'm really happy to be here with you tonight. The Xerces Society is a nationwide nonprofit. It was founded in 1971. Does anyone know what Xerces was named after, if people are familiar with Xerces? So the Xerces blue butterfly was the first butterfly known to go extinct due to human causes. And a group of conservationists came together and said, we need to do something to protect insects and their habitat. No one is doing anything about this. So we are a team of about 100 staff. I am in Livingston, Montana. I am one of two people who live in Montana. There's no one currently based in Wyoming. And we have a wide array of teams. So we work with a lot of farmers doing pollinator enhancements. We have a freshwater invertebrate team. We have a monarch team. And so there's quite a bit of work that we do within Xerces. Also, really quick, I just wanted to mention, if people have questions throughout, please feel free to chime in as you think of them. It's nice to hear what you're thinking about as I'm up here. So go ahead. Okay, so pollinators are considered keystone species. So for all of these things that we take for granted, like clean air, clean water, the food that we eat, pollinators play a significant role in this, and ecosystems would collapse and look completely different without them. We know that more than 85% of flowering plants, usually this is an insect, this is required for pollination. Usually with pollinators, we think about the food that we eat. And yes, this is very important for things like all of the nutritious foods like Brussels sprouts, strawberries, blueberries, we rely on pollinators. But pollinators are so much more than that. So I like to put them in the context of how they're important for wildlife. So tiny little critters like this ground squirrel rely on nuts and seeds that are pollinated by insects. Pollinators are pivotal in providing habitat for tiny little critters like this little fawn here in the middle. And pollinators themselves are also very important in providing food directly in the food chain, like this little caterpillar that got stuck in the chickadee's beak. So there was a study done a number of years ago that looked at how many caterpillars one breeding pair of chickadees needed throughout the breeding season. Any guesses with like how many caterpillars?
20,000?
20,000. What else we got?
200.
200. Okay, that's a pretty big gap. It's about 10,000 chickadees, or 10,000 caterpillars for one single pair of chickadees. So quite a bit of food is being consumed by other organisms, and pollinators play a huge part in just providing food in the food web. So there's 6 main groups of insect pollinators: the butterflies, the flies, the moths, the wasps, and the beetles. They are all actively collecting pollen and nectar as adults. And so if you think about a butterfly kind of flitting around different flowers, sure, it's transferring pollen from flower to flower as it goes, but its job is to sip the nectar from the flower because it wants to mate and have energy for flying. But bees, on the other hand, they're a little bit different. You can see here, she is actively collecting pollen to bring back to the nest for her young. And so she is traveling from flower to flower, actively harvesting that pollen to bring back to her nest to provision nutrition for her developing larvae. Because of this, bees are the most efficient pollinators. So they are intentionally collecting and transporting pollen. And they have these specialized structures or hairs on their bodies so that they can carry pollen. So let's just walk through the images on the slide. So the far left, we have a bumblebee. She is carrying this beautiful purple pollen in a corbicula or a pollen basket, which is a groove on its hind legs, this shiny groove when it's empty. And she will pack the pollen into these huge balls on her legs and then deliver that back to the nest. This photo here is of a mason bee. So you can see the pollen is on the underside of its abdomen. So another name for this is a hairy belly bee. This photo here, she's carrying the pollen on these modified hairs all over her legs. So quite a bit different from a bumblebee, where it's just packing that dry pollen directly onto the hairs of its legs. And this last bee on the right is a little bit tricky because at first glance, it looks like it's not carrying any pollen, but she actually swallows the pollen and nectar and regurgitates it when she gets back to the nest. So when I talk to people about bees, was there a question?
Yeah. The first bumblebee, when she packs it, she actively using her arms next to it, or just almost just a passion, something.
Yeah, so this is really cool. You should come catch bees on Monday because they take their legs and they brush themselves. They take their legs and they pretty much brush it onto the legs. So they're actively doing that pollen packing. Yeah.
Bees on Monday.
Well, I'm going to tell you all about that. We're going to catch bees and practice this Bumblebee Atlas protocol on Monday. So when I talk to people about bees, usually people think about 2 species of bees. I hear them talk about the honeybee, which is non-native to North America. And people generally know about bumblebees, the huge, fuzzy, they fly all over in your gardens, in parks, etc. But I just want to highlight the incredible diversity of pollinators that we have. From these huge fuzzy ones to iridescent blue-green, jewel-looking bees to kind of some scary-looking ones that may look like wasps, but we have an incredible diversity of pollinators on this planet. In North America, we have over 5,000 species, and since I work mostly in Montana, I will be referring to Montana a lot in this talk, but the work that's being done in Montana to catalog the wild bee species, it's done through Montana State University's Casey Delphia and Mike Ivy's lab. They're working on this. And every time they do a collection trip, they're adding more and more species to the list. So I think they had over 600 species the last time they checked. And when they started 9 years ago, they only had 200 species documented. So in some ways, this is the Wild West for wild pollinators. We're still discovering so many things about them. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you do any collecting in the alpine? And when I mean alpine, I mean above 10,000 feet.
Yes, there are bumblebees in the alpine. They're actually one of the fewer pollinators up there. And my partner Joshua was up in the mountains above 10,000 feet, and there was still snow, and there were bumblebees flying around.
Are there any just that are indigenous just to the alpine?
So there are alpine specialists. Yeah, some bumblebees that specialize in that habitat. Yeah. Yeah, so bumblebees, we know a little bit more about them compared to other wild pollinators. We have about 50 species in North America, and over half of those species have been documented in Wyoming. So the Rocky Mountains is a really special place for pollinators. We have this convergence zone of eastern US species, convergence of western US species. We have all these diverse habitats, and because of that, we have a diversity of bumblebee species. And one of the cool features of bumblebees is their ability to buzz pollinate. Many other bees cannot do this. So what this is a bumblebee will grab on, usually she bites onto a flower. This, I believe, is a eggplant or some kind of a nightshade flower. So it's either a pepper or an eggplant flower. And she grabs on and she vibrates her wing muscles at a very specific frequency so that the pollen releases from the anthers, and these flowers for many species won't release pollen unless they're vibrated with that specific frequency. So honeybees can do this, bumblebees can. There's a species in Australia that does pollination, buzz pollination with its head, and it just bangs its head against the flower and that vibrates it and releases the pollen. Someone put this to heavy metal, so look it up on YouTube. It's pretty entertaining. So there's a lot of things that look like, a lot of other insects that look like bees, because other insects want to look like they have a stinger. So you probably didn't know you were going to get quizzed tonight, but now is your turn to get involved. So of these 8 photos, how many do you think are bees between 0 and 8? And you can hold up on your fingers how many bees you believe are in these photographs. So take a look, think about it. Oh, that's a quick answer. Okay, let me scan and see. I'm seeing a wide range from 0. I think the highest that I see is 7. Okay, this is great. The real answer is 1. Who got 1? Raise your hand. All right. We got some winners in here. So this bumblebee, this is a Bombus bifarius. She is the most common bumblebee species that we have. And the point of all of this is that catching bumblebees and identifying them is very challenging. There are a lot of lookalikes, and there's some tricks that I can teach you if you continue to be involved in the Bumblebee Atlas, where we go through what's the difference between a fly and a bee, a wasp and a bee, and all of that. But I'm not going to go into those details now. So let's go underground and take a look at a bumblebee nest. So I love showing this photo because a lot of times when people think about bee hives, they think about these super organized hexagonal honeycombs of a honeybee. Bumblebee nests are not that. They are a little bit chaotic, disorganized, just kind of blobs of wax where they then lay their eggs in these little chambers of pollen and nectar. The reason that they can get away with this messy strategy is because they're only using this nest for 1 year. So bumblebees have a 1-year life cycle where a new queen in the spring will establish a colony. And we'll go into that a little bit later. But her and her workers will spend 1 summer in the nest, and then that's it. They won't go back and return to that same nest the next year. And compared to a honeybee hive, so honeybees have anywhere from 20,000 to 80,000 individuals. Bumblebee colonies are quite a bit smaller, so they're between 25 up to 1,000. I think the average is like a couple, like 2 to 500 individuals. And they mostly nest underground in abandoned road burrows. So let's talk a little bit more about this colony life cycle. So in the winter, a queen bumblebee will bury herself in a few inches of soil or compost or leaves, and she just hangs out for the winter. So she's mostly frozen at this point. She doesn't have very good claws to dig with, so she can't actually dig very deep down in the ground. So she just hunkers down and waits out the very long Wyoming winters. In the spring, you'll see these huge queen bumblebees, sometimes the size of half your thumb, flying around looking for flowers to start harvesting nectar and pollen. Nectar for herself to establish her energy reserves, and then she'll start looking for a suitable nest location. Most of the time, this is in abandoned rodent burrows underground. Sometimes it's in rotten logs or rock piles. Every once in a while, I hear about fun things like a bumblebee nest in a dryer vent or the side of someone's house. So they can be creative in where they choose to nest. So once she's established a suitable location, a queen will lay her first batch of eggs. And she has this tiny little pot where she will sip nectar for the duration of the time that she's incubating her eggs.
Wow.
The temperature fluctuates quite a bit in the nest, and so if it gets too cold, she will vibrate her flight muscles, the same thing that she does for buzz pollination. She'll do that so that she can warm the eggs for incubation. Her daughters will hatch, and those become the worker bees. So this first brood leaves the colony. They start foraging pollen and nectar, bringing it back to the nest. At this point, the queen will stay in the underground in the nest for the remainder of the season, incubating eggs and laying more eggs. In the late summer, early fall, then males and new queens will begin to be produced. So they will emerge from the nest, mate, and then the workers, the old queens, the males will all die at the end of the season. So the only ones to survive are the new queens that were produced in the late summer. And then she will do the same thing all over again, bury herself in earth and wait out the long winters. So that's the life cycle of a typical bumblebee. Question in the back.
Is it considered hibernation or something else she goes into it?
I think they call it torpor. Yeah. Yeah, so what I just explained was a normal bumblebee cycle. Now we're going to talk about parasitic cuckoo bumblebees. So this is where things get really interesting. So once the other like typical bumblebee species colonies have been established, then a cuckoo bumblebee will come in, look for an existing colony, and she will kill the queen, and the workers of that colony will then rear the cuckoo bee's young instead of their own species. So this is totally normal in nature. This is actually a sign of a healthy ecosystem. If you have enough bumblebee species and nests established that can support parasites, this is a very good thing. But cuckoo bumblebees are just fascinating. They look a little bit different than other bumblebees. You'll notice on their legs, I'm just going to get this to follow me here. Okay. So you can see on their legs, they don't have that pollen basket. So they're not carrying any pollen because the workers of that other colony are doing all the work for them. And they have very thick exoskeletons, strong stingers. They look like they're created for battle. They're just burly bees. And the worker bees will put up a bit of a fight. My favorite strategy is that the workers just vomit nectar all over the cuckoo bee, so she just kind of gets stuck there. And the other strategy that cuckoo bees use is that sometimes they come into a nest and they're really secretive about it. They just kind of hang out in a corner for a little bit until they get the scent of the nest, and then they can just take over the nest because the workers think that like, oh, everything's normal. This is our queen. So they're tricky bees. So bumblebees are most active between June and August. So we're starting to see a number of worker bees active now. The males won't emerge until later in the season. But this is also the time where begin our bumblebee surveys for the Bumblebee Atlas. So we have a fairly short window to get our surveys in. So a number of bumblebee species are at risk. I think in the beginning in the 1990s, some bumblebee researchers came together because they were noticing that very common species were just pretty much disappearing from ranges that they would expect to see them. And so the International Union for the Conservation of Nature put together a group of specialists who assessed every single species of bumblebees in North America. And what they came up with, we'll start with the good news. So 28 species are species of least concern. So those populations are doing just fine. But what's concerning are the species in yellow, orange, and red. So those are the categories from near threatened to critically endangered. So about 1 out of every 4 bumblebee species is known to be in decline. And what's also concerning with this is the category in gray. So 5 of those species didn't have enough data to even do an assessment, which is generally not a good plan. So there's 4 species in Wyoming that are known to be in decline. The Western bumblebee, American bumblebee, and Morrison bumblebee were categorized from that IUCN assessment as vulnerable, and the Suckley cuckoo bumblebee was assessed as critically endangered. And since that assessment came out, that was about 10 years ago, a lot of work has been done for bumblebee conservation. So all of those species have been petitioned for protection under the Endangered Species Act. And as of the end of last year, the Suckley cuckoo bumblebee was proposed as endangered. So the soonest that this would actually get listed would be early next year. So it's not currently protected, but it is in the pipeline to be protected.
No, that's a parasite point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we need the diversity of bumblebees, and it's a sign of a healthy ecosystem generally. Yeah.
Well, the cuckoo bumblebee lay eggs and have more queens, like a normal queen would, or no?
Yeah, so they will lay eggs, exactly.
Yeah.
And they will become the females, which will be the new queens, and males. So I'm gonna, oh, go ahead.
What is it about certain species that causes them to be endangered versus other species?
That's a really good question. I think there's a lot of work looking at some of the genetics of these because the species in decline tend to be more closely related to one another. But we'll get into some of the threats that bumblebees are facing, and some species are just more sensitive to that. Yeah. So we're gonna talk about 2 of these 4 species tonight. So the Western bumblebee used to be one of the most common bumblebees through the western half of North America. So this map here is showing a study that was done in 2023. So the black lines are showing the different habitats. So we're here in the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem. And the darker the color, the higher the occupancy. So what this means is that if you go to a site, you're more likely to detect it. And so what this is looking at is that from 1998 to 2020, there was a very sharp decline in the species. You can see, especially like along the west coast, the species has pretty much disappeared. So the white was not detected at all, where it used to be much higher occupancy. And in the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem, it is in decline, but not as severely. So I think it's actually declining about 15% compared to 93% across its range. So actually I have let's zoom in on the GYE here. So even though it's not as high occupancy as it was in the 90s, we still do have this species. And I think this means that we have a responsibility for the conservation of this species in this ecosystem. Last year, I know in Montana, we found We found this bee in numerous locations, but we simply need more data. So this bee has a bright white butt. So if you see white on the tip of the abdomen, that is a Western bumblebee. There's no other bumblebee that looks like that in this area. Yeah,
When
question.
you use the term occupancy, is that to range or is that to numbers?
That is to numbers. So going to a site and 100% occupancy means if you go there, you will see it. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So the Seckley cuckoo bumblebee is very closely connected to Western bumblebee because it uses the Western bumblebee as its primary host. Other cuckoo bumblebees are not as specific. So Seckley cuckoo bumblebee has been in sharp decline since the decline of Western bumblebee. So this is a map of all of the observations all time. So one of my colleagues has cataloged and inventories this database of every single bumblebee record that we know in the country. And so if you look at this map, it actually doesn't look too bad. There's a number of records throughout its range where we would expect it to be. But now I'm going to show you the record since 2000. So there's only been one in Wyoming, and I believe that was last seen in 2015. So we're not sure if this bee is even currently here anymore, or if it's extinct. But if we're going to find it anywhere, I think it would be in the GYE because we have a fairly healthy population of Western bumblebee. So reasons for decline are many, and many of these threats are synergistic. So a paper came out in 2021, which was called Death by 1,000 Pets. And it summarized the global threat to insects, which is a lot of human-induced actions, things like wildfire, climate change, pesticides, etc. And I just want to talk about 3 of these threats tonight. So the first threat is disease. So bumblebees began being produced commercially in the 90s, and this was mostly used for greenhouse pollination. So honeybees do not do well in a greenhouse setting. They just ram up against the plastic and they're not actively pollinating on the flowers. Bumblebees have much smaller ranges, so they actually do okay in a greenhouse setting. So a lot of tomatoes, peppers, things that are cultivated in greenhouses, there was a shift to use bumblebees as pollinators. But in order to do so, they're bred in labs, and there's typically not many suppliers of bumblebees. So you have a situation where if there's a disease outbreak, then those colonies are getting shipped all over the US and they have those diseases. And what do you think happens if a bumblebee is inside a greenhouse? They're going to get outside of the greenhouse and spread those to wild populations. Yeah, so this is a fairly unregulated industry. Only Oregon and California have regulations on this, and we believe that this is one of the main reasons for decline of the Western bumblebee. The other threat is competition. So bees need pollen and nectar for nutrition, and honeybees on the landscape are also doing the same thing, foraging for pollen and nectar. So there was a study done in 2016 that looked at how much pollen honeybees are collecting, and they compared it to what 100,000 wild bees need for their progeny. So if you have a landscape with a ton of flowers and you have honeybees and wild bees coexisting, maybe that's not so much of an issue. But if there's limited resources and you have a single hive of honeybees of 20 to 80,000 individuals, they're going to steal all of that pollen and take it away from wild pollinators. The other threat is habitat loss. So, if we look out and see the diverse landscape, all of these flowers that we have naturally in an ecosystem, and compare it to a monocrop, this is not providing enough food for bees. Agriculture can also damage bumblebee nests since they nest underground, so it's going to be damaged by earth-moving activities. And also urbanization is not great for bees either. People love their lawns, and this photo has, a few flowers here underneath the tree, but that's just not providing enough for what bees need. So that was the gloom and doom part of the talk. So now we get to talk about some actions that you can take to help pollinators. So a very simple thing is just to simply provide food for bees, so planting flowers. Also providing nesting and overwintering habitat for bees in addition to flowers. And to improve existing data sets like things like programs that are currently existing, such as the Bumblebee Atlas. So if you're interested in creating pollinator habitat, there's a spectrum of possibilities. And if you're interested to get started, some of the actions that you can take is just doing less work. So less mowing, less cleanup, less pesticides, and then simply adding more patches of flowers really does make a big difference for pollinators. So I want to show you my yard from last summer. So when my partner and I moved into this house, we smothered the lawn and decided that we wanted to plant native plants in the front yard. And very quickly, so there were some winners. So we had some plants that just kind of turned into a jungle. We had, over 6 feet tall plants, and it was very exciting to sip coffee and figure out what pollinators are here today. And as I was doing that one morning, I saw a really interesting looking bumblebee that I hadn't noticed before. So I caught it, put it in my fridge, because that's a way that you can get it to calm down and take a closer look at it. And realized that it was the two-spotted bumblebee, and this bee hadn't been seen that far west. So it was a Park County record. It's known over in eastern Wyoming and eastern Montana, but not as far west as Livingston. So the point of the story is that if you plant the flowers, the bees will find it and they will appreciate it, and you never know who's going to show up. So bees don't just need any flowers, they need the right nutrition all season long. So nectar provides sugar and pollen provides protein and fat. So pollen is the only source of protein for bees, and protein content ranges widely from 2 to 60%. Fun fact, any of the pea family, so lupin, vetch, etc., those are very nutritious, very high in pollen content. And the highest flower, so the 60%, is a shooting star. Do people know this flower? It's a beautiful wildflower, and it is the most nutritious for bees.
And they're really out right now.
They're very, yes, they are out right now. Yeah. And also fat content varies quite a bit, from 1 to 20%. So every scale of planting flowers is important for conservation. So even things like balcony gardens, community gardens, things like that, all of these add up to contributing quite a lot of resources for pollinators. If you're considering planting flowers, consider things that are blooming from early spring to late fall, because that's the period where bees will be active and out foraging. And oftentimes for spring blooming plants, think about shrubs and trees, because as perennials, they produce large amounts of flowers typically very early in the season, in ways that wildflowers may not just provide that much resources. And fall, yeah, go ahead.
Are the bees more attracted to native flowers versus hybrids?
Ooh, okay, I'm gonna have you wait 2 slides. I'll get there. Okay. Yeah, for fall, I really there's so many blooming asters, goldenrods that just bloom very late into the fall. But just think about that. It's really easy to select our favorite flowers, and then you have a pulse of bloom right in the middle of the season, but you don't have a lot of flowers early spring and fall. Okay, so not every flower has pollen and nectar. So you might think, oh, it's flowers, of course it's providing resources for bees. But a lot of garden varieties don't offer nutritional value for bees. So anything that's double petaled, these primroses here, yes, they're pretty, but they actually don't have any resources for bees. So think about that when you're selecting your plants. And as far as native versus non-native, insects have co-evolved with plants for so long that yes, there is definitely an advantage to planting native species in ways that cultivars or showy ornamentals will just not provide the same amount for bees. And I just recommend finding local nurseries that specialize in native plants. There's a lot of options that you can choose from. And one more plug for native plants is that they're so well adapted to our environments. I mean, we have all these temperature fluctuations, harsh winters, drought, all of that. These native plants are going to thrive in ways that our showy ornamentals will not. So it's generally less work, less input, and you'll have better results with native plants. If you are feeling overwhelmed and don't know what to plant, Xerces Society has put together a list. I actually brought a few of them tonight that you can come and grab after the talk if you're interested. So we've talked a lot about flowers, but there are some other key components for providing habitat for pollinators. So this is a little specific to bumblebees, but for nesting locations, having brush piles and rock piles in your yard will be beneficial, as well as bunch grasses. So a lot of times when we think about pollinator mixes, we think about native wildflowers, but we kind of forget about native bunch grasses. So bumblebees some species will nest right here in this area between the dead vegetation from last year and the new growth. So don't forget about bunch grasses. And overwintering locations are things like bare dirt, leaves, overgrown areas. So leaving your yard a little bit messy is actually very good for the pollinators. Don't feel like mowing, it's for the pollinators. So all of these things that we can do for pollinators, roadside habitat, community gardens or city parks, farmside habitat, having patches of flowers in your yard, all of these are contributing so much habitat for pollinators, and it adds up to making quite a difference. The Xerces Society has a number of books ranging on a variety of topics. So these are available at xerces.org. You can look through our publications list. And we also have put together a number of fact sheets, brochures, and guidelines. So if you're thinking about starting pollinator habitat and how to prepare a site, or conservation of bumblebees, or how pesticides influence pollinators, we've put out a number of resources. So all of these are free. You can download them, check it out on our website. If you are interested in ecology and conservation of bumblebees, this is just a very quick overview, but I work with a staff of 8 other folks who are very well versed in bumblebee ecology and conservation. And once a year, we put together a webinar where we talk about our expertise and different components of ecology and conservation. So that already happened this spring, but there's a recording of it on our YouTube channel, or you can join us again next spring.
Do you use citizen scientists?
Oh, the other way that you can join, that you can help pollinators, is through citizen science. I didn't plan that question, I swear. Yeah, so the Bumblebee Atlas, is a community, let's see here, I have this here. It's a community science effort. So we basically want to get a better understanding of bumblebee species across the region, what flowers they're using, what habitats they're using, and then we can compare that data over time and look and see what species are in decline, or if there are any range shifts like these bees that we're finding further west than we've ever seen them before. And this is something that is a great community science project because it's pretty simple. We catch bees in nets, we photograph them, and it's something that you can do pretty much anywhere. And community science means that anyone can participate who cares about bumblebee conservation. And the Bumblebee Atlas is a collaborative effort. So we're active in 20 states now, And each state or region works very closely with a partner. So here in Wyoming, we work very closely with the BLM, and we don't move into a new area without having established partnerships of folks who actively want to utilize the data. So we work with a lot of state and federal and local partners. And the general protocol for the Bumblebee Atlas is that you hunt the bees with a net, you put them into a little plastic vial. That vial goes on ice. Once the bees are on ice, they're completely still, they're not stinging, they're not moving, and that allows you to handle, look at a bee up close, and take a number of photographs. Since this project just started last year in the Rocky Mountains, where we still have a ton of work to do, but we had 21 species detected from the very first year, so 21 out of 29, which I think is pretty impressive. And a lot of those were detected like mostly Western Wyoming, so we will continue to add more species as we go throughout the state.
How low should the temperature be when they're in the vial and right down? That's a refrigerator or freezer?
Refrigerator, yeah. If they go into the freezer, they die. Yeah, so we use a cooler.
They don't go into the pork.
It's too
Trick them into being.
It's too cold. Yeah, it doesn't. It's not winter. It is sudden death. Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah, and the goal of the program is to do 2 surveys per grid cell. So the region is broken into these 50-kilometer by 50-kilometer grid cells. And the map shown here are the prioritization of the grid cells. So the lavender or the light purple cells were surveyed last year. I know there's some yellow over in southeastern Wyoming. That's simply because they start a little bit earlier because bees emerged a little bit sooner there. But same thing, the light yellow and the light purple were surveyed last year, but as you can see, there's a lot of work to be done. So if you live in an area or travel to an area that is dark purple and are interested to contribute to the understanding of bumblebees, please consider getting involved in this program. Photography is very important because all of these photos of bumblebees get submitted to our data portal. This is the data of the project. All of those images get reviewed by myself or my colleagues, so you don't have to be an expert in Bumblebee ID to participate, but taking good photos is essential. Yes, question, friend.
What if sometimes you put it in ice and then lay it out, would it just fly away?
So yes, let me go back. So after we take photos of them, they start to warm up within 2 to 5 minutes and then they fly away. And that's exactly the goal of the project. We're not killing bees, it's catch and release, and we want them to fly on their merry way.
Also, do you put them in water and then ice?
No, just ice. Yeah.
So they're not in a bottle, so they're not in a water bottle?
No, just a cooler with ice.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, so in order to participate in the program, we offer a number of online and in-person training opportunities. So Monday is a field training day at the Kelly campus, Teton Science School. So this is Monday, June 30th from 9 to noon. There's a QR code, which may be a little bit cut off on the slide. If it is, you can just put your name on the list or come and talk to me and I can give you information about this event, or just show up at the Kelly campus at 9 a.m. on Monday. But we will go through and do an entire Bumblebee Atlas survey. So you'll learn techniques of how to catch bumblebees, handle them, and take photographs of them. And this is something that could not be done without your involvement and the public's involvement in this program. So since this started, we have hundreds of thousands of observations that we simply didn't have before, and this is increasing our understanding of bumblebees. If you're listening to this and you're like, summers are packed, there's no way I'm gonna volunteer on another thing, that's okay. We have another way to get involved, which is simply taking a photo of a bumblebee. We need the location of that, and then you can upload that to Bumblebee Watch. So this is really important for rare bees. We talked about the Western bumblebee before. So this is this bee with the bright white tip of the abdomen. If you see this bee in your garden or out on a hike, it takes a second to snap a few photos of it and upload it to the website. The Xerces Society is a member-supported organization. So if you're interested to learn more about this, you can visit our website. And that is everything I have. So thank you. Do you have a question in the front?
Yeah. Like, then we putting in a bottle, freezing it ice, make it mad, and then once it burns, that was gonna sting you.
The question is, if you catch a bumblebee, put it in a vial, put it on ice, isn't it mad at you? Yeah, that is a great question. I like to think of it as a short interruption in a bumblebee's day. They take a little nap. They are not angry when they wake up. And I'm glad you brought this up because bumblebees are the friendliest of the bees. They do not want to sting you. They even, if they're feeling a little bit threatened, they'll even give you a bit of a warning sign. And this is just like a, hey, give me some space. You're in my personal bubble. So if you see that front leg of a bumblebee, that is them saying back off. But their stings are very rare. My claim to fame last year was that I had never gotten stung by a bumblebee after handling thousands, and then I got stung last year. So I made an accident when I was handling it in the net. It was totally my fault, not the bumblebees, but they are very rare. Question back here.
When it comes to wasps get like a bad rap. Is that just, or should we just kind of like accept them?
This is not my area of expertise.
In relation to bees, are they a lot of competition to bees?
No, they're going for different resources. So bees are the vegetarian version of wasps. So bees evolved from wasps and started collecting pollen and nectar instead of eating insects or meat sources for protein. There are some invasive species of wasps that can be very disturbing to human activities, but there are also some incredible wasps that offer so many benefits, like eating mosquitoes, so not all wasps are bad, but there's a lot to go in there, and that's about all I'm gonna say for now. Yeah, question back here.
Do the bees die after this?
No, they can sting multiple times. So honeybees die after one sting, bumblebees do not. Yeah. Yeah, question over here.
Really enjoyed the part about like native I live in America. Native mushroom for a couple of years with a little bit of mixed success. Actually, different motivations. Instead of reporting economies, we use it for transport and experiments, and actually for our own foods a little bit. I'm not sure my neighbors like that I motivated. But I like yours. That I'm hoping you guys can make a sign, something I can put in my yard and say it's for the pollinators. But maybe I'll make one that says sport.
Yeah, so for those on Zoom, the question was about having native plants in your yard, and maybe your neighbors don't quite understand what you're doing, and they think it looks weedy and messy, and you're like, no, I'm doing this for the pollinators. Xerces actually has like native pollinator habitat signs, and so you can go on their website or have good conversations with your neighbors about why you're doing it.
But my question is though, so one of, as sort of using it for foraging and stuff, one of the things my family and I have been worried about is mosquito fogging, because that comes to our capillarity. Foggers go down the house and they just miss it. I'm just wondering from your perspective, does that affect? And actually, one of the things we have enjoying in our yard are bumblebees. And I also sit in the fogging bumblebees. But I wonder now that the fogging season starts, is that the bumblebees?
Yeah, the question is about whether mosquito fogging influences bumblebees, and I don't know enough about that to answer that question. My guess is that it's detrimental. I don't know if it's enough to kill an adult bumblebee, but it could potentially, if it's getting sprayed on a bumblebee nest and it's getting underground, it could impact, egg, larvae, pupa, etc. So generally I would say it's not a good thing, but I don't know enough to say more. Yeah, question in the back?
You said that honeybees are not from this area, how do they go from?
Yeah, so the question was about honeybees and how they were brought over. So honeybees are native to Europe and Africa, and I believe they were brought over on ships with settlers to pollinate plants. Yeah, I mean they're absolutely essential to the way that we produce food. So you know, I did say my bit about honeybees and competition with wild bees, but there's no way that we would eat the food that we are currently eating without the help of honeybees. Yeah, another question in the back?
Yeah, in that same vein, I think like recent years there's been both we save the bees and a lot of people immediately not be a honeybee and
Yeah.
getting like a honeybee nest in the backyard or making your own honey, that kind of thing. And you alluded to it, but is there like a maybe let's hold on that and maybe not be doing that or doing that in conjunction with these things? Kind of what is your work focusing when it comes to that more fashionable safe honeybees versus like with this, but not well, I mean not know about this as much that they're different.
Yeah, great question. The question was about the Save the Bees campaign, energy going towards honeybees, and whether that effort is a bit misguided. And my take on it is that the beekeepers should be the farmers that are pollinating large areas of crops and not be kept in our backyards, because backyard beekeeping is not regulated at all. And you can have a bunch of neighbors who are super interested in saving the bees and getting a bunch of hives, and they're directly competing with wild pollinators. And so the Save the Bees campaign has nothing to do with wild pollinators. Backyard beekeeping is not conservation. So my take on that is to increase habitat, plant lots of flowers, protect wild spaces, and that's doing a lot for wild pollinators. Yeah.
Yeah, you just mentioned the backyard bees. What about the commercial honeybee people that take them around in semis to say pollinate almond trees in California? Does that have an effect on the native bees that might be, the bumblebees that might be there?
Yeah, the question was about commercial honeybee colonies, competition with wild bees. Did I get that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's hundreds of thousands of insects. I mean, do we eat almonds? Yes, we eat almonds. We like almonds, so therefore honeybees are important for that. But any of the wild bees in the surrounding area, which there might honestly not be a lot of in a monocrop of almonds.
Well, they pollinate other things as well. That's just...
Yeah, but yeah, same thing for monocrops. They're in direct competition with any other wild bees that are in the area. Yeah. Yeah.
We have a question. I think they're from Idaho. Can we report to the Atlas from Eastern Idaho if we get trained? So people that are not in Wyoming or Montana.
Absolutely. The question is about getting involved in the Bumblebee Atlas from Idaho. And so the map that I showed earlier, Idaho is included in the Bumblebee Atlas. It's in a long-term monitoring phase right now. And so there's specific monitoring stations. So if you go to bumblebeeatlas.org, you can look at the map and look and see where those monitoring stations are and if it fits with where you live. Yeah, question
Is
here.
the Bumblebee Atlas correlating the timing of the emergence of the bees with the fluctuations in the blooming of the flowers that they feed on? Does that have to be a big impact also to the conservation of bees? So they can just one of its overall goals is to identify that.
Yeah, the question was about bee emergence and the timing of flowers that they're on, and if we're tracking that for the Bumblebee Atlas. So we're tracking which bees are using which flowers, and we also document the top 15 flowers in the area, so we can see what flowers are bees actively utilizing and when, because we have all that information from the date of the survey. we're not directly tracking phenology, but we could get that indirectly. And I think more importantly, we're trying to understand what are the flowers that bumblebees are using throughout the season. And a lot of our federal partners are very interested in the plant side of things because they want to develop restoration seed mixes or plant native plants. And they want to understand, like, well, what is good for the bees? Like, is the Western bumblebee preferentially foraging on some specific plants? And there has been some research done on that. So not directly, but there is that data in there. Yeah.
You have a good guidebook for bumblebee identification?
Oh, well, this is great.
Use Peter's guide sometime.
Well, so if you come up here after the talk, this is a quick field guide. So this is not every single species that you would find throughout the region. There are a lot of different color morphs, so there doesn't have every single one, but the most common bumblebees will be shown on this ID guide. So feel free to take these. The authoritative book is Bumblebees of North America, and that will have every species of bumblebees, and it'll go into like very detailed features of those. But if you're interested in ID, Bumblebee Watch. So if you take photos of bees and submit them to Bumblebee Watch, there's an ID guide that can kind of walk you through your process identifying your bee. So you can say, oh, it has black hair on its head and white on the tip of the abdomen. It'll show you the options, which would only be the Western bumblebee. And we also integrated our database with Bee Machine, which is an AI assist. So it will suggest an identification for you, very similar to iNaturalist. So there are some ID tools that are currently out there. Yeah, another question in the back.
So that you showed earlier about which states and whatnot are participating, is there a reason for?
We need you to get out there and survey. Yeah, we just don't have people involved in the atlas currently. I work mostly in Montana. My colleague Amy Dolan, she covers Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, and Nevada. And so I end up traveling to Wyoming a little bit, but there's a huge geographic region that the two of us are trying to cover. So there's a lot of data gaps. So if you or your friends are interested in collecting data, please tell them about the Bumblebee Atlas. And there's some other resources up here. There's the plant ID guide. There's information about the atlas. And then you can put your email down if you want to learn more about Xerces or about the Bumblebee Atlas. Any other questions? These are great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.